Hey, DM Dango here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're looking at a Throne of Bone. So, a Throne of Bone. What are we looking at here? This time we're looking at an adventure module, a rather short one in my opinion. Not as long as some of the larger, more campaign-oriented ones, but still a very good one nonetheless. The adventure module schedule is slated for 4 to 5 players of about 6 to 8 level. Now, in my opinion, I've been looking at it. I think the level range is a little high. I think on the lower side would probably be fine as well, about 5 to 7 maybe. And I think my players wouldn't struggle too much with those in terms of the combat encounters and the way they would handle things. In terms of the overall structure of the module, I think it's split into kind of 2 parts. There's an initial setup phase where you have a farmer essentially with a problem. They have wolves attacking them and coming after them. And there's a lot of build up in this initial setup, a role play between the farmer, you, him trying to convince you to come, him trying to convince you to kind of deal with that, and a very home country kind of lifestyle to kind of enforce that. And I've only seen this kind of character development in an NPC in a couple of instances, one of which is to when a DM tries to use this to kind of build up rapport with this NPC, make an emotional attachment, emotional bonds, especially when you're writing stories, and then to potentially murder them off later in a way of kind of eliciting an emotional response from their players. I'm not going to spoil it whether that actually happens or not, but I think maybe the intention was there at one point or another. Moving right along from that, included in the pack is every map you need, along with several handouts and several other little bits and pieces, and all of the monster stat blocks that you need are mentioned in the book. The one thing that I think is lacking is the exact page numbers where they exist within both the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, or Dungeon Master's Guide in several cases. Now, there is a bit of a point of contention on the DM's Guild whether or not this is allowed, but I have seen it in other products on the DM's Guild, so I'm not sure where the legalities lie in this specific case. So I think the author probably just erred on the side of caution here. In regards to the balance or overall nature of thing, I've already said that I think the level range that they suggest here is a little on the high side, but then thinking about it and thinking about why you would do that, why you would have the level that high, I think part of it is because there are some traps and things in here that are a little more on the lethal side of the scale. So I think having that extra little buffer to maybe even have access to some of the early resurrection magics like Revivify and Raise Dead may help cushion the blow from a lot of these more dangerous encounters. The reason I would lower the level range is because in certain groups, especially with moon druids or some of the more powerful war clerics or something similar, I think that a lot of the players would just breeze through some of the combat encounters and find some of the more social or trap-based logic puzzles in easy to push through. So another thing I wanted to mention is the lore contained within the module itself. The Throne of Bone module has some very good notes and key points on the lore about how the throne was created, where it came from, what inspired it, and how it why it has the powers it has. And it's very well documented and put together to make it so that it seems plausible within the world that's been constructed. It's very good to see that instead of the usual fare that you sometimes get, which is there's a thing, it does this, you have to accept that. But it's not too heavy-handed like you get in, for instance, the Star Wars prequels, which is a midichlorian problem which you didn't really need to explain. There are certain fundamental rules that you don't need to explain. There are some things you probably do. Gives you enough information from that perspective. And it also, in addition to that, because of those things, it gives you nice plot hooks into the system itself and into your world you can pull into. You can change this throne to be more of a much more powerful magical artifact, such that it causes certain effects, or maybe your big bad is actually seeking this throne and now you've found it. Oh, now you need to protect it. Oops. Because you've managed to unlock it and go, oh no, now what do we do? It has interesting moral implications behind that as well, because you have this thing that was created essentially as a throne of bone. You can't imagine this thing being anything but evil. Well, that means that you've got an evil artifact that is potentially incredibly powerful. Do you use it or not? And that's kind of one of the premises of the whole module, is what you do. And there are things in there to say award inspiration for if your character does this, even though your player is like, hell no. Kind of award inspiration. And that's one of the things that I do like. There are certain points in the book that it calls out to say, word inspiration for this, word inspiration for that. And I don't think that happens enough in some of even the official modules where they don't kind of tell you to award inspiration. I think it's something I even forget when I'm doing my games, is to award inspiration for character-based decisions, ones that are either detrimental or even positive outcomes. Sometimes the characters and players forget to do things that are in character, and awarding inspiration for that is always a good thing, or when you do something cool. As for my final rating, though, I think this is probably a 5 out of 5. I would give it slightly less than 5 out of 5, but DM's Guild doesn't really allow you to do that. The only reason I would give it less is he's a slightly more verbose than I would ordinarily like to see in a module like this, but that's not necessarily a complete detriment. I think it's mostly a case of my DM style means that I would rather see less verboseness and less long-windedness, is how he puts it himself in the own module. And I think it would probably be better if it was just slightly less or more condensed in certain places. There was also a lot of time spent in the farm. And I would like to have seen that revisited and more kind of come back and fleshed out, or more done with those NPCs that you've built up to kind of bring them back into the Throne of Bone, or have them have a secret that is attached to this this unique magical artifact that they've basically been sitting on this entire time. It might be nice to kind of tie those NPCs back into the end of the module in some way. And I think as a DM, I would probably do that. If I was going to take this module and use it, I would pull those NPCs in, make them something special, or make them something unique and interesting to allow that kind of interaction to happen. But all in all, I do like the module. I think it's a really great little adventure. And thank you. Please do remember to like and subscribe this video. I do have a contest running currently. It's on my other video on Minor Magics. If you go back to there, comment on that video, you can win a copy of Minor Magics. Thank you, and goodbye.